What is Fallout? You may be asking that question if you live in an alternate universe where Fallout isn't a billion-dollar franchise being shelled out of every corner. You probably already know that Fallout is a post-apocalyptic RPG set in the future devastated by nuclear war, and blah blah blah. Look, you already know it all, and nowadays post-apocalyptic settings are very mainstream. But let's go back in time to the original Fallout. See, back in the 90s there were basically hundreds of role-playing computer games to choose from. Even more now, but the point is, after playing Dungeons & Dragons computer game number 999, you kinda start to get desensitized to the tropes of the genre, to say the least. Oh, there's goblins in the mountains that need to be taken care of? Great. Oh, an evil dude has kidnapped the princess? Wonderful. Oh, I need to assemble a band of adventurers to save the land from an ancient evil? Been there, done that. So here comes Fallout. In this game, there are no chivalric knights that keep the peace and defend the weak. Instead, there's a xenophobic technology hoarding cult that treats outsiders like the barely human, uneducated trash that they are.
Well, I talked to the High Elder and he said that not just anyone can join. He said you have to complete a quest first. You'll do it? You will? Great, just bring it back here. Good luck.
Undead zombies and skeletons roaming around ruins and burial sites? How about ghoulish humans who've had their bodies melted and deformed by radioactive decay, led by a ruthless warlord who holds their city together with his violent will?
There'd better be a killer reason for standing in my shadow. Does next on the menu ring a bell for you, Normie?
Orcs and goblins? How about super mutants?
The super mutant is the next advancement in human evolution. To save the world, we will convert all the worthy individuals.
The victims of an ancient top-secret government bioweapon, an experiment gone too far that still haunts the world even after the nuclear apocalypse wiped away centuries of human development in an instant, reducing humanity to a bunch of small frontier towns with rampant lawlessness. I think you get the idea. Fallout twisted the usual RPG tropes and molded them in a brilliant way to fit its setting. The old world blew it, literally, and the new world is still living with the consequences of their past failures, while desperately trying to establish a new civilization. The first thing you're presented with in Fallout is its very in-depth character creation screen, which allows you to create a lot of different types of characters, from a smooth-talking diplomat to an eagle-eyed sniper, an antisocial scientist, a gunslinging mercenary, an explosives expert, a pacifistic doctor, basically anything you can think of within the context of the game. You can customize your character's name, age, and gender, along with their starting special stats. Special, of course, is the now famous acronym that stands for Strength, Perception, Endurance, Charisma, Intelligence, Agility, and Luck. And I'd say that each of these stats is pretty important. They all add or subtract essential elements to your character, maybe with the exception of Charisma. Charisma is the least useful stat in my opinion because it's only good in the early game, as it gives a good bonus to your speech skill starting out. But you can just leave Charisma at 1 or 2, and then level up your speech skill every time you level up, and still unlock all the speech checks that way. Intelligence actually has a much greater influence on dialogue options than Charisma, as well as determining the amount of skill points you can assign every time you level up, making it probably the best stat in the game along with Agility, which determines the amount of action points you have in combat. That's really important because combat is turn-based, and action points are essentially points that represent the amount of actions you can take in combat. The next best stats I'd say are basically all the rest in any order you want. Strength, Perception, Endurance, and Luck are all really fun stats to play with, both high and low. For example, having a really low intelligence score will completely turn your character into an actual moron, incapable of coherent thought or speech. And I don't just mean in an abstract sense. I mean literally all lines of dialogue in the entire game are changed to reflect how your character is a complete moron. Another cool aspect of the character creation system are the traits. Traits are sort of permanent modifiers you can add to your character that usually come with an advantage and disadvantage. For example, the Jinx trait increases the amount of critical failures your enemies have in combat, but it also does the same to you and your allies, leading to an insane playthrough full of people accidentally shooting each other in the leg and having their guns spontaneously explode. You can even make a Jinxed character with the maximum luck, meaning you'd be the luckiest person in the world but also simultaneously bringing misfortune to all those around you. This is one of my favorite things about throughout Fallout. Whether you got a really proficient character in the standard, practical fashion, or you come up with a uniquely backwards twist on the system, you get a completely different gameplay experience that is just as fun and rewarding as the other. And it all makes sense in the context of the story. Your character is sent out of his or her vault, one of the underground shunters designed to blah blah blah, you know what a vault is. Anyway, your vault's water chip is broken and your task is to go out into the wasteland to find a replacement for it, or everyone will run out of clean drinking water and die. Now if your character is a smart and capable person, then it makes sense that the Overseer would send you out as the most likely candidate in the vault to get the job done. And if you're really dumb and incompetent, then it makes sense as the Overseer probably sees you as an expendable resource to throw out into the wasteland. Or if you're the luckiest man alive, then I guess you might just happen to find it. Or if you're the unluckiest man alive, then it's really true as the Overseer chose you of all people to take on this extremely hazardous job. Anyway, once you're done making your character and make your way out of the vault, Fallout really opens up. The game has an open-ended design. I guess you could say it's open world as you can go anywhere in the map and approach areas in whatever sequence you choose. But there's not much besides empty desert in between the key locations where the real meat of the game is. So it's kind of like an open-ended collection of hub worlds. When you first start out, you only have a single lead that the Overseer gave you. But even on your way there, you find an entirely new place unknown to you, the town of Shady Sands. You can actually go anywhere in the game world at any time. And because of this, you can uncover leads and clues to your objectives in different orders. If you knew where the end objectives were beforehand, well then you could actually just go straight to them from the start and skip huge portions of the game. Of course, just starting out you wouldn't know where anything was, and so wandering out in the desert trying to find a key location would be really dangerous, especially since there's random enemy encounters when you are exploring. And you'd probably want to level up a bit because you're pretty weak when just starting out. In fact, one of the most common enemies in the desert, the giant red scorpions, can actually poison you, causing you to continually lose health. So yeah, you're probably going to want to establish a footing in the wasteland before haphazardly wandering into the desert to meet your death. Each level up in Fallout is almost as important as the initial creation of your character. Every level up rewards you with skill points that you can spend increasing your proficiency with skills. And there are plenty of skills, some are more useful than others, but all of them have a use in their own right and help you with your adventure in some way. But what I'd argue is more interesting are the perks. Every 3 level ups, you can choose from a list of perks to attach to your character. These are things like increasing critical hit chance, reducing the number of action points you need to spend for a certain action, and so on. What's really great about these perks are that there's prerequisites for them. Some perks you need a high strength stat, some perks you need a high agility stat, or perception, or luck. So you can only ever get the perks your character qualifies for, meaning these perks further help to define your character that you made in the beginning of the game. If your character is smart, they might be learning faster. If your character is strong, they might be hitting harder. That's the character side of things, but what about items and equipment? Well, there are a good amount. There are the usual key items, I guess you could say, like in a lot of games, like pass cards and whatnot to access certain areas. There are items to assist with your skills too, like the electronic lockpick. But overall, more important in Fallout are the consumable items like stim packs, which are the main method of healing. And of course, there are radiation medications like Rad-X, which increase your resistance to radiation, and the Radaway, which cures your radiation sickness. You can also find skill books that when used increase a specific skill by a small amount. The most fun type of consumable though are the chems, which are basically performance enhancing drugs that boost your stats and add other effects. They can even be used to boost your stats before using the level up screen so you can hit the requirement for certain perks. The downside to this is that your character can easily become addicted to them and suffer withdrawal symptoms, though there are chem related traits and perks you can take to help with this. Yeah, that's right, you can make a character build based on being a drug addict. So like in any RPG, the most important items are of course the weapons and armor. Armor is pretty straightforward, mostly following a simple progression of early game, mid game, and late game armor sets. And they're pretty nice, from the Mad Max inspired leather jacket to the poster boy of the game, the power armor. Power armor is by far the most effective armor set in the game, making bullets bounce off you like they're nothing and providing a huge boost to your strength stat, allowing you to carry more stuff. I don't even think it hurts your chances of sneaking. Once you get it, there's honestly little reason to use anything else. Unless of course you're a man of taste and culture who likes wearing the combat armor variants instead for their superior aesthetic appeal. One interesting piece of clothing though are the robes, which can be used as a disguise in certain areas. One of the more seldomly used features in Fallout. Anyhow, the game does much more with weapons than armor. There are unarmed weapons like the brass knuckles and power fists, melee weapons like knives, spears, and sledgehammers, small guns like pistols, SMGs, rifles, and shotguns, big guns like flamethrowers and rocket launchers, energy weapons, weapons like laser and plasma pistols and rifles, throwables like frag, plasma, and pulse grenades, and even placeable traps like dynamite and plastic explosives. Each weapon type more or less follows a tiered progression like armor, but there's a huge difference when it comes to ammunition. Each weapon uses its respective caliber ammunition it was chambered for, and some ammo is more or less rare and expensive than others. So you might find a flamethrower but not be able to use it all the time without finding more ammo. There are a lot of variables when it comes to weapons and ammunition in Fallout, which is great to play around with when using different characters specialized in different weapon types. Speaking of weapons, the turn-based combat system is actually quite entertaining, with brutal death animations and sounds. You can blow people's heads off, vaporize them to dust, melt them down to their bones. They're extremely detailed and satisfying, and a much needed flavor to the otherwise standard turn-based combat system. You can also execute aimed shots targeted at specific body parts. These can be really satisfying as well to pull off, and it's always great when you manage to hit someone in the groin with tactical accuracy. Now it is pretty unbalanced, with some tactics and builds being far more effective in combat than others, but that doesn't really matter too much to me, and I'll explain why. Unlike a lot of RPGs that spend a lot of time having you cut down hordes of monsters and dungeons, Fallout's biggest strength is when you're solving interpersonal conflicts between very real and fleshed out characters. You can go through the entire game as a pacifist without killing anybody, or on the flip side of things, you can also play through the entire game killing everyone standing in your way. Fallout is designed in a way that means you can take on any playstyle you choose for your character and still have a full experience. And playing through the world of Fallout is really fun in my opinion. The game has some very well thought out locations, each with a backstory and their own local issues. The world building is extremely well done. Each new insight or clue leads you into the next, from encountering the children of the cathedral who claim to be seeking everlasting unity, to a mystery involving missing trade caravans eventually revealing more details about the story, or the secretive Brotherhood of Steel being mentioned by various characters but nobody truly knows what they're all about, so you get varying stories from different people. Even an unassuming mutant named Harold who recounts his experience assaulting a military base with his friend Richard Gray. Every bit of detail in the game relates to one another. You may not even realize when you're first playing that you're being carefully introduced to the world and its stories in a brilliantly sneaky way. Fallout has a very dark and bleak atmosphere that, while isn't entirely without hope, personifies the desolation of the post-nuclear world. There are primitive settlements, trade caravans, water merchants, religious orders, raider gangs, and other groups forming the beginning of a new civilization. The characters in the game are really charming as well. Some of them have really neat voice acting and animated faces that adds a lot of immersion to the experience. They're called talking heads, and not every character in the game has them. A lot of the time you're reading text like in the classic RPG fashion, so coming across a character with a talking head can be a great experience. I think they use sculpted clay heads and computer imaging to make them, and they really made the game come to life. I'd have to say it was a very good idea and a worthwhile investment, especially since they come with really good voice acting as well.
Very nice. The merchant lives in the Heights, on Barter Street and Thunder Avenue. Your initial pay will be handed to you on your way out.
I don't remember inviting anyone to my room, and yet I have a visitor. Why?
I always get even further immersed in the world with the perfectly fitting soundtrack by Mark Morgan. It sets a very dreary atmosphere for the entire game. You can hear the newly primitive sounds of the post-nuclear world like tribal drums and wind instruments, contrasted with echoes of the past like air raid sirens, radio chatter, war drums, rumbling engines, sounds from computer electronics, and more. Honestly, on paper, the idea seems like a horrible one. A bunch of annoying noises that barely resemble music on their own, except it's orchestrated perfectly and gives such an enormous presence to the game's world. It gives off a very grim realization that the mistakes of the past still haunt the present, probably the most common theme in the game, evidenced by the fact that the series' motto is "War Never Changes." Fallout does its best to fully realize your character and how you want to play it, whether it's shooting, talking, or sneaking your way out of situations. One of the earliest quests, rescuing Tondi from the Khans. You can fight them, negotiate for her release, propose a trade, challenge the leader to a duel, stealthily free her by sneaking through the back entrance, and a couple more methods. And this quest is just one of the very first ones you encounter. It's pretty much like this for the entire game. Each situation has many different solutions, and it's basically up to you to come up with them. This level of non-linearity to the gameplay combined with the great character creation system allows you to basically play the game any way you can come up with. Every way you construct your character and play your character, the game will recognize it and react in meaningful ways. It is an extremely rewarding experience and offers a great amount of replayability. I personally think it's one of the easiest games to get yourself lost in when it comes to trying out different characters and different solutions to problems, which invariably leads to different outcomes. Fallout definitely sets sort of a gold standard when it comes to role-playing computer games. And of course, since it was made in 1997, the game isn't without its technical flaws. Companions barely have any management system to speak of, and can frequently block doorways and even shoot you accidentally in combat. There are also some pretty annoying engine limitations, but there are plenty of fan-made patches, enhancements, and mods that add quality of life improvements if you wish. For example, allowing the use of the mouse wheel to scroll through the inventory, rather than having to tediously click the up and down arrows. Fallout represents a type of RPG that really appeals to me, truly embracing choice and consequence to the fullest by allowing you to create and play many different types of characters and have a rewarding experience with each. The world building is phenomenal, showcasing the formative stages of a new world civilization and the conflicts of the people inhabiting it. The game's presentation certainly helps as well. Everything is tied directly to the world, from the amazing soundtrack to every part of the interface that represents pre-war computer terminals and other technology. The game is full of the palpable danger and mystery you'd expect from a world devastated by nuclear war. I'd say most of my real issues with Fallout 1 are all things that are retroactively applied to it, as in the other Fallout games that come after it do certain things a lot better. For example, Fallout 2 has much more varied content, and New Vegas is way better when it comes to character builds and story choices, but I'll talk about those things more when I make videos on those games. Anyway, thanks for hearing my thoughts on the original Fallout. Until next time, peace.